Before finding our special Lenten reading, I had never realized the close kinship between Gandhi and St. Francis. They both saw themselves in oneness with all of creation. The suffering of any person or creature became their suffering. Their faith, although coming from different traditions, led them to a universal love of all life. That love was the foundation of their passion for justice. Francis left his wealthy family's comfortable home and spent the rest of his life in poverty and service. As he lay feverish on his deathbed, he refused to allow his companions to light a fire to warm him, vowing not to have such a luxury when there were too many who could not afford it. Gandhi was born into a Hindu family without great resources. He was raised on the classic stories of Indian heroes whose great deeds were motivated by truth and love. He later wrote that those heroes filled his mind. Those stories would be enacted in his life over and over again as he campaigned for the poor, for women, outcasts, and eventually for the freedom of his country. Like Francis, he lived simply, sleeping on a thin blanket and eating very little, even when he wasn't on a hunger strike. These two men practiced what Jesus said in today's gospel, reading from John. Our translation says, "Those who love their life will lose it, and those who hate their life in this world will keep it for eternal life." The word life here does not mean biological life. There's a word for that in Greek, and it's not this. What is in the original Greek is psyche, psyche. My Greek expert, Reverend Mark Davis, says that it is better translated as self. It seems to me that it is that part that puts me first. To turn away from that, to hate it in John's words, is to be willing to set the self aside for the good of others. Needless to say, this is hard to do. And when it happens, it looks like Francis or a Gandhi. The best I can hope to have is a Francis or a Gandhi moments, and always working to have more of them closer together. When one is able to do that, all of the things like violence, white supremacy, racism, genderism cease to make sense, and they cease to motivate. I have felt overwhelmed lately by the overt hatred that we are seeing in the world. No one should live in fear of being hated to death. And yet that's what our Asian brothers and particularly sisters are feeling. The craven stoking of anti-Asian animosity is shameful. The centuries of refusing to see the equal worth and belovedness of all people is leading us to a very dangerous place. It is leading us to a place that doesn't look at all like Francis or Gandhi or Jesus. To give up your psyche, yourself, is to set aside those parts of you that respond with fear and anger. If we could see what motivates someone to violent, racist behavior, I believe that there are two things that would show up: fear and hatred. Put a white supremacist in an emotional MRI chamber, and you would see fear. Fear of not being better than someone else, and therefore maybe not as great or as accepted as you hope you are. That is the part that Jesus talks about giving up to save your life. That would be a have you been saved question that I could understand. Have I been saved from the dangerous things that lurk in my psyche? The process of being so saved can often mean dealing with a kind of shame that comes up when you start to reckon with how you have historically thought of people. I do fear for our nation right now, because there is a virus more deadly than COVID running wild. Fear and hatred of anyone who is not white is flooding the airwaves, the internet, and social media. This week, we have all been reminded what easily well-armed hatred and anger will do. Please pay close attention to the blessing today. In the midst of so much despair, we need to give ourselves some grace and find some things to feel good about. And for us, I am proud that Trinity led the way to the newly opened well at the Halcyon High School in East Central Uganda. Hearing Gandhi's words, I hear the call to love other countries as much as we love our own, to love people with all manner of differences, and like Francis, to be at least uncomfortable getting fresh water from the tap when too many do not have it. This well at the Halcyon High School will bring so many kinds of freedom, especially for the women and children whose job it always is to go and find water. It is freedom from disease that comes from the only water they could often find. It is freedom from being invisible to the rest of the world. All that for $2,500. It's pretty neat. And so we come to the end of Lent. We have looked at unity from every angle, have seen where it is not present, and witnessed how its absence is a danger to us all. If doing something to help create a spirit of unity feels overwhelming, I invite you to gently prepare for next week, Palm Sunday, as we enter Holy Week. In Holy Week, we come face to face with the dangers of following Jesus. This Christianity thing is not for the faint-hearted. Holy Week is like that emotional MRI chamber, and it can help us see what lies within that we can do without. Jesus did all that he did so God would be glorified. May our hearts and our actions also reveal God's glory. And may we remain grateful for the freedom and joy that we know is to come in the promise of new life made on Easter morning.